Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and this is episode 151 recorded on November 23rd, 2016. And if you want to see all of my episodes, you can go to walkinthepark.tv on my video blog at any time to see any of my shows. This time we are going to go a little afield. We're actually going to go to Texas, the Gulf of Mexico, to Corpus Christi. I was at a conference in November 8th through 12th, the NAI, National Conference. What is that? In Corpus Christi, Texas. NAI stands for the National Association for Interpretation, which you can find out a lot more about at their website at interpnet.com. Now, what this National Association for Interpretation needs interpretation, so here's what it means to be an interpreter. What is interpretation? So in the words here of others, if you help visitors learn about a place that's important to you, you're an interpreter. Interpreters connect visitors to important natural, cultural, and historical resources at parks, nature centers, historical sites, aquariums, zoos, and anywhere that people come to learn about places. NAI defines as interpretation as a mission-based communication process that forges emotional and intellectual connections between the interests of the audience and the meanings inherent in the resource. So that's what I've been doing for many years, and we're going to go to the national conference and hear a keynote speaker. Now, this is where we went, to Corpus Christi, Texas, which is about 100 miles north of the Mexican coastline on the Gulf of Mexico, and just northwest of Padre Island National Seashore, which is one of the longest stretches of undeveloped shoreline. I'll do that in another show. We'll talk about that. Here's a view from my hotel in Corpus Christi, and here are my cellmates. That's Doug Elliott, who is a master storyteller from the mountains of North Carolina, and Bruce Bierbauer, who is the environmental educator for the Catawba Science Center in Hickory, North Carolina. Good friends of mine. So anyway, we roomed together for this conference, and I'm going to take you right, we get a long video here. I'm going to take you right to our keynote speaker, who is Dr. Larry McKinney, and he is speaking on the sad state of science. What we have here is a failure to communicate, and I won't spend any more time talking about that. We're going to go directly to the video, and he'll be introduced.
And I'm so glad you are all here to continue telling America's stories. Stories of hope and history, stories that reflect our diversity and strength, and stories of science. And our keynote speaker this morning could not be more appropriate, because now more than ever we need to have an eco-literate society, people who understand science in a real way, and it is interpretation that is going to do that. Dr. Larry McKinney had 20 years with the Texas Parks and Wildlife, managing interpretive programs, and now is with the Harte Research Institute, which is working to make an environmentally and economically sustainable Gulf. And he's going to talk this morning about the importance of interpretation in science. And again, couldn't be a more timely message. So Dr. McKinney, right here, take it away.
Thank you for that introduction. Good morning and welcome to the Coastal Bend on the dawn of a new day in so many different ways, which is the end of my political comment for this session. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this morning. I hope that will become evident as I go through my presentation. When I was asked to talk, of course, I had to come up with a title for my talk. It didn't really take that long. After about 40 years, at least that's all I'll admit to. After about 40 years as a marine biologist, scientist studying and working in the Gulf of Mexico, I do have the opportunity from time to time to step back out of the trees and take a look at the forest And in reality, I see the forest needs a lot of work. And so what better organization and group of individuals to come to ask to help than you all, people who, if you'll pardon my summary, people who help us understand the past and comprehend the present and hopefully prepare for the future. And so that's what we need as scientists. We need your help desperately. And so I want to kind of make that point as we go through today. I want to talk about and what I learned and how the great privilege I had in working with folks of your skills and dedication while I was at Parks and Wildlife, while I was really dealing with environmental issues, fisheries, and that type of thing. I had the opportunity to work with a group of really dedicated folks in hunter ed and boater ed and aquatic education and with our park interpreters. And I learned the great value that they brought to our department in taking what we're trying to do every day as scientists and actually making it comprehensible and understandable to those that we need it. It was really important to us. And so that's where I learned my appreciation for what you do. So let's get on with the question at hand. So why is science sailing? And particularly in the 60s, when I was growing up, maybe some of you, maybe not, science was seen as the answer. It's what would give us the answer and inspirational. I decided to become a marine biologist when I was in the 7th grade out in the deserts of far West Texas. And there were a lot of reasons for trying to get out of West Texas. But one of them was, for example, my hero, Jacques Cousteau in The Silent World. I watched that show as it came on and I decided that's what I wanted to do. And we do still have those heroes, but what we have found out that in the subsequent years between the 60s and now, some 2/3 of Americans can't even name a living scientist or an institution or an organization where researchers are conducted. Now we have our heroes like Jacques Cousteau. Here, one of my favorites in the middle there, of course, is Sylvia Earle, who's a close friend and advisor for the Institute. But we have Neil deGrasse, we have those folks that are doing these things that come across, but still, we don't seem to make that connection anymore. So I want you to remember these two things today. One, my name, Larry McKinney, and the Harte Research Institute, where we do research. So now, you are now smarter than 2/3. Listen to me for a minute. So the question is, have scientists just moved into their ivory towers? What has happened? Have we become isolated on purpose or just got lost in the great internet of noise or whatever? There's a lot of reasons for this disconnection. Certainly, scientists these days get no reward or no recognition for doing what we would call interpretive work. They are evaluated on their academic teaching, their research, and their publication. In fact, they are often discouraged from taking that science that they worked on and trying to interpret it and make use of it. They get no reward for it at all. And so when they do get that opportunity and move forward, they really have no training or no way to do it. That's where I think you all come in. This is where I think you can help us, and we really need that help desperately. So the aspect of this that I'm going to talk about is communication. Obviously, that's something that you all are experts in, and I think it's an important issue. I am an unabashed fan of the Big Bang Theory. I watch it all the time. I think it's great. I have an institute that are full of Sheldons and Littards and Bernadettes and Amy's, Kutrapalis, maybe one or two Wallabies. We don't like to admit that, but probably all dedicated people. But again, many of them, basically, if you ask them what time it is, they're going to build you a clock, and then you won't understand what they're saying anyway. But that's the challenge that we face. So what has been the damage over the years of our failure to communicate? So I've looked around to try to find some way to evaluate that, and I found this really interesting assessment or survey that was done around the world, and they've asked in this survey some pretty sophisticated questions. I thought it was an interesting approach. For example, the question is, the universe began with a huge explosion, Big Bang. And the correct answer is true, and you can see the United States doesn't fare too well in answering that question, a little below half. Other parts of the world do a little bit better. Another sophisticated question, human beings as we know them today developed from earlier species of animals. The answer is true, by the way, if you didn't know that. And this one was a particular issue to me that we did so poorly there, but basically that's what I did. In my dissertation, I basically looked at the evolution of a really insignificant group of crustaceans called amphipods, which nobody knows about water foods, basically. And so that whole issue of understanding evolution as a fact is important. On the other hand, the geologists have done a bang-up job of getting their concept across. Here's one. The center of the Earth is very hot. The correct answer, yeah, it's true. And it looks like lots of people in the world, including the United States, understand that concept. And that may be understandable, but even this next question is even more so. The continents have been moving their locations for millions of years and will continue to move. That's a pretty sophisticated concept. Look at how many people understand it. Basically, geologists rock. They understand that. Us biologists can learn something about it. So in summary of the thing, what we talk about, of course, is some 74% of Americans do know that the Earth rotates around the sun. That's positive. 73% know that there's a difference between astronomy and astrology, more than just the letters. And even 60% of them have gone to a museum or a zoo. So that's positive. So I guess I would say there is hope for us yet, or at least I think so. So what I thought we would do then, if that's the case, I think let's find out and take a quiz. I mean, if you invite a university professor to come talk to you, you know there has to be a quiz. So that's what we're going to do. So here's the first question. The Great Wall of China can be seen from space. No, actually it's not. My fault. Doesn't have you think it is, but it cannot. Antibiotics kill viruses. No, they don't kill viruses. They can work on bacteria, but not on viruses. Beginning to get the tone. You can make 100 on this test. You just kind of keep up with this. Bumblebee flight violates the laws of physics. No, they don't fly the same way airplanes do, but they are subject to the laws of physics like we do. Here's what I like. Twinkies have You all may think so. It's actually about 45 days. I don't really want to test that 45 days. Maybe some of you have. Okay, this may be important to you if you decide to go out to the beach today. That if jellyfish stings your urine will alleviate the pain. Now, it might be really interesting to see that application and figure out how that goes, but the answer is no. Vinegar will work a lot better. So try that if you happen to go to our beaches. Left-brained people are more logical than right-brained people and are more creative. No, not really. That all came from a book years ago. The book was called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. Ever since that book came out, it was just assumed that was the case. No, it's not. Okay, we only use 10% of our brains. Now, I will admit that while you're sitting here listening to me today, that might be the case. But over a period of 24 hours, you use just about all of your brain. Evolution doesn't leave anything to waste, but when they do, it all shrivels up and goes away. Maybe some of that's happened to some brains, but typically we use them all. Electromagnetic fields, like those produced by your cell phone, will give you cancer. No, but scientists, as always, we never like to give just a straight answer. I try to, it's always, the answer is, there's currently no conclusive evidence. Scientists never like to say black and white. We like shades of gray because we think of all kinds of possibilities. The pH of our bodies is out of whack, so getting more alkaline food and water in our diets will cure us of pretty much everything. I go out to the gym and work out, so I swim about a quarter mile most days. And so I get up about 5 o'clock in the morning. I go by a place called the Donut Palace. And I walk in and they have my standing order ready. Now, it's a sad thing when a Donut Palace knows what you're going to order before you get in there. It's probably not a good comment. But they're a wonderful couple, a Thai couple that immigrated here and trying to they set that business up. They work hard every morning to do this. And one morning I came in and the walls of the store were surrounded by cases of alkaline water that even had a a dispenser. They can dispense out 5-gallon carboys of it. And I just thought about how, but the fact is, no, it really doesn't. The pH in our bodies varies over a range of things, and we need all that type of thing. Alkaline water may help your digestion, maybe, but it's not the cure. All kidding aside, here's a really serious one. Vaccines cause autism. No, and this is a myth that has been perpetuated for many years, and it's one that has caused a lot of harm and in the future, and these are why these types of issues are so important to address. Well, there's lots, you all use this every day. As you're trying to impart by working with the people you're working with, you're always trying to come up with fun facts and terms and those type of things to get them interested and get them to learn something. So there's lots of terms and questions like I just gave you. That's a fun exercise. Maybe there's some value in it, but you can't, as you see, you can't slip some value in it from time to time. I'm not telling you anything, you do this all the time. But the next part of this is where we really need your help as scientists, and this is the idea of critical thinking. Taking that information, all those facts and figures, and being able to sort through them, assess them, and come to a conclusion of where you need to go. That's what's important. You know the old saying that if you give a person a fish, you can feed them for the day. If you teach them how to fish, you can feed them for the lifetime. And this, I think, is the critical area that we as scientists need your help. How to take facts and figures and actually assess them in a way and come to a conclusion that is meaningful. And that is, in all seriousness, why we need you so much, and why the skills that you have, that you developed in your career and over years, we need you doing just what you're doing. And I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate what you do in that regard. This is certainly important to me. If you're, as you all are, in kind of the environmental business, you better have your glass half full. You're not going to survive very long if you don't. I basically operate under the premise that if people have access to the best available science and the critical thinking skills to sort it out, they will make the right decisions. That is often tested to the limits of whether that's true or not. But that's how we have to operate. And that's why the tools that we need to handle, we can handle, are so important in what we can do for them. And so that's what I'm going to do to begin to wrap up my presentation with you today. Is to talk to you about the Gulf of Mexico, because you are sitting here right on the edge of it, so you might as well know something about it before you leave, and why I've studied my 40 years on it, trying to make the case that it was worth the while, and also that you'll get something out of it. It is an incredibly dynamic system, the Gulf is. In this graphic here, the blue is pressure water, the red is highly saline water. That big blue blob on the right there is the Amazon River, the largest river in the world, pumping out pressure water, which goes right up through the Caribbean and right into the Gulf of Mexico. The blue at the top, upper left there is mostly the Mississippi, but a lot of rivers in Texas, the Brazos, the Colorado, and so forth, but mostly the Mississippi River. And they all mix, as you can see, and meet right there in the Gulf of Mexico. And it's like a big stirring melting pot where everything is stirred up and things come out of it that are really important. One thing that does happen, if you follow that course around the tip of Florida, you see that yellow stream going north. That's the Gulf Stream, which is the only reason that much of Western Europe, Ireland, Scotland, Scandinavian countries are even habitable, because of the altimeter indicates the climate there. So the Gulf has worldwide impacts as well. It's also, the Gulf of Mexico is called America's Sea. And the main reason is, if you look at this graphic that's forming up on the scene, is the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River Basin drains about 40% of the entire inner part of the Gulf of the USA, and it all comes here to the Gulf of Mexico. So basically, whatever happens in the heartland is reflected in the Gulf of Mexico, and this is one of the reasons my institute spends a lot of time on trying to come up with metrics on how we can evaluate the health of the Gulf of Mexico as a large marine ecosystem on its side. It's a difficult chore, but if we can accomplish that, we can get a pretty good reflection not only of the status of the Gulf of Mexico, but the health of the country as well. So it's something we spend a lot of time looking at. It's an interesting body of water. It's a sea of contrast, I'd like to say. It's a place where a healthy economy and a healthy environment both coexist, but from time to time contend. And of course, one of the big issues where we had that contention happen with us was in the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, which we're still recovering from. And the Gulf is so resilient that for the greater part of it, it has recovered in the area of those kinds of animals that cycle frequently in their life cycle, the shrimps, the crabs, and many fish. They have come back. You can't even see where the oil spill might have had an impact. But when you move into the deep Gulf, for example, a mile deep where this spill occurred, the oil is still sitting there. And it's in an area about a little bit larger than the size of the city of Houston. It will remain relatively interactive for the next 75 years before it too is buried by sediment and that type of thing. The long-lived animals in the Gulf, the whales, which we have several populations of indigenous whales that live in the Gulf full-time, porpoise, sea turtles, these things have been impacted and will be impacted for many generations to come. Again, that's in the terms of 50s to hundreds of years. So there were, as you might expect, varying impacts. But the point I'm trying to make is the Gulf, over time, if it remains healthy, can absorb a lot of insult, and it has done so. And part of what we study at the Institute and what we are always concerned about is at what point does that resilience, that like a rubber band that keeps being stretched over and over, at what point does it not snap back? And obviously our goal is not to reach that point. And we're not there yet. The Gulf of Mexico is the gas station for the nation. 40 to 50% of all the oil and gas development in the U.S. comes from here. You take a look at this map which shows pipelines. You see all the pipelines converging there in the Gulf of Mexico. It is like a true series of arteries, and the heart is in the Gulf, we like to say, and so that's important. At the same time, the Gulf of Mexico produces over 1.4 billion pounds of seafood every year and supports 40% of the recreational fishing for the country. It's a $16 billion annual economic impact. I often travel up to the Washington, D.C. area for various meetings and this type of thing, and have the chance to eat at the wonderful seafood restaurants there on the north of the Chesapeake and on the Potomac. And it never really bothers me to tell my eastern friends that, by the way, the shrimp and the crabs and oysters that we're sitting there eating, there's probably 80% chance that they came from the Gulf of Mexico, not the Chesapeake or any place on the East Coast. So it never bothers me to tell that. Sorry. But that balance has come at some cost. We have in the Gulf of Mexico over half the wetlands in the U.S. and over 90% of the seagrass. But in keeping this economic balance or development we're going on, we have basically lost half of those resources. Yet the Gulf of Mexico continues to be resilient, but at a certain point, where does all that loss add up? You just can't keep taking away and thinking it's going to come back. It's not going to happen. So that's why we look at the Gulf of Mexico as being vital to both the energy and environmental security of our country. It's a place where the unusual is common. A few hundred miles that way from here is the Flower Gardens National Marine Sanctuary, the healthiest coral reef in the Atlantic, far healthier than anything in the Caribbean. It has somewhere between 50 and 70% coral coverage, whereas in the Caribbean, we're happy if we see 15 to 20%. It rivals anything in the Indo-Pacific, yet surrounded by it, surrounded in that national sanctuary are oil and gas platforms and pipelines all around it, yet it's there. And every year I take my students there in August, the 9th day after the first full moon of August. All the corals on the flower garden spawn at one time, about 9:30 to 10:30 at night. And it's like a reverse snowstorm with gametes coming up, whales, sharks, and manta rays, and everything else coming in to feed on those. It's one of the most magical things you could ever see. It's one of the things to see that you should see in your lifetime if you get the chance. If you'd like to come see me, you might get help me do that. As I said, it's a place of incomparable beauty. I really get to the point where I don't like to talk about this, the Gulf of Mexico, because many of my colleagues in the north, who remain nameless, really think of the Gulf as just this industrial sea, which they have given up. Basically, so we don't have to worry about putting conservation dollars in the Gulf. It's gone, it's lost, it's all oil and gas platforms and ships moving and all that stuff. And to a certain extent, I don't mind perpetuating that myth just to keep them out of here. But it doesn't help us in the long term, so I still do make that point. Like over in Florida, the mangrove islands there, the thousands of acres of mangrove flats that the water's crystal clear on, are full of manatees and tarpon and everything else you can think of. The wetlands in Louisiana, where you can get into, and once you get into the middle of them, you really honestly can believe that you're back in the Jurassic. You can't, it's that primitive and that wild. It's just incredibly beautiful. It's also extraordinarily productive. Over 70% of our oysters we produce in the USA is produced in the Gulf of Mexico. 69% of the shrimp that we capture are also taken there, or here in the Gulf. Over 6.2 million anglers every year come to the Gulf of Mexico. This is my wife and son, by the way. I use this picture all the time. Wow. And this is a daily occurrence. We catch this. But anyway. So with all this, I would leave it to make the point that this is, the Gulf of Mexico is worth all of our best effort to conserve, not only for now, but for those who come. And that is why my institute was created. That is why what you do matters so much to me. I thank you more than you can believe. I know how difficult your work is, and many times unappreciated, not unappreciated here. But I want you to know that it's incredibly valuable to us. And with that, I want to thank you for being here and allowing me to talk with you, and more so and more importantly, for what you do. So thank you very much.
Okay, so it's pretty interesting talk about the Gulf of Mexico and also the importance of those of us who interpret our natural and cultural resources, that the professionals studying some of these things really need us to bridge that gap. So that's all I've got for the show today. I did take a few days after this, couple of days after this conference, to go to Padre Island National Seashore, and I will follow that up with another show at another time. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again soon.